Hi, and a very warm welcome to you. My name's Dr. Fiona Aubrey Smith, and my background combines school leadership, advisory support, and academic research. And for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be sharing with you some ideas that will help you to develop and strengthen the skills and confidence of your teaching staff. I'd like to invite you to join me on a journey through what teachers need to know in order to teach STEAM effectively, the relationship between pedagogy and subject knowledge, why knowledge and access are foundations for STEAM success, but not solutions in themselves, how to focus teacher development more impactfully, and finally, what to do next, a practical list of actions. So let's get started. What makes an individual teacher capable of teaching STEAM effectively? More importantly, what makes a teacher shape student learning about STEAM effectively? Well, let's start by thinking more broadly about teaching and learning. We know that expert teachers are those whose knowledge combines three separate but interlinked domains. Pedagogical knowledge, about what makes effective teaching and learning. Subject knowledge, knowing the subject that's being taught. And subject pedagogical knowledge, knowing what effective teaching and learning looks like specific to that subject. Let's look at a really simple maths example to illustrate this. 12 add 13 equals what? Let's imagine we're teaching addition of two-digit numbers to a class of Year 2 children. As teachers, we're going to need three forms of knowledge. The pedagogical knowledge might include the basics, such as establishing what children can already do or recall, and engaging the learners in a meaningful context for this new learning. The subject knowledge might include the process of adding two-digit numbers together. And that could be about partitioning those numbers up into tens and units, or it could be the process of column addition, for example. The subject knowledge will also include awareness of the prior skills that children will depend on to be able to do this. So, for example, here, place value. Children knowing what each digit in that two-digit number represents. And then the all-important subject pedagogical knowledge. We'll need an awareness of how children come to understand the ideas around place value and addition so that we can preempt misconceptions. For example, if a child is adding 12 and 13, their answer could be 16. They might be starting with 12 and then adding 1 and 3 instead of 10 and 3. So that shows a good awareness of what addition means as a form of counting on, but some pretty big misconceptions within their understanding of place value. Now, that's just a simple little example, but what we've done here is to surface the importance of three different but interlinked sets of knowledge: pedagogical knowledge, subject knowledge, and subject pedagogical knowledge. And before you ask, this does make an assumption that skills are a form of knowledge, procedural knowledge, if you will. So here's the thing. Professional knowledge can be taught explicitly, right? We can read it, we can watch it, we can memorize it, we can repeat it. Now, if we wanted to be provocative, we might even say that these forms of knowledge are the kinds that could even be automated. And certainly there are those who would argue that the very best educational AI software already does this, providing formative assessment-based learning pathways for core subjects such as maths and science. So the big question for us is, how do we turn professional knowledge into effective professional practice? The answer to this is to pause thinking about the teaching and focus instead on the teacher. The teacher as a human being. The teacher as a human being in a world surrounded by STEAM. The teacher as a human being living in a world surrounded by STEAM, whether they see that STEAM or not. What does STEAM mean to that teacher, to that individual human being? What experiences have they had of STEAM, not just as a teacher, but as a learner themselves on their own lifelong educational journey? What experiences have they had of STEAM as a human being living in 2022 with all the opportunities and challenges that that brings? And what relationships have they developed with each of the principles that underpin STEAM? For example, how capable is this human being of problem solving, of collaborating, of communicating, or of critical thinking? What does creativity, resilience, and growth mindset mean to this teacher, this individual human being? How big is the gap between what this individual teacher has experienced so far in their own life, both personally and professionally, to what we are now asking them to teach to others? How big is the gap? What is the scale of the bridge that we need to build for this teacher to cross that gap? Now keep hold of that thought, because we're going to come back to it in just a moment. Now, one of the issues that often comes to the surface when we talk about certain subjects or certain approaches to learning is to do with the physical and conceptual access. And there are often debates about access to opportunities, to equipment, or to stimulating experiences for both teachers and students. And these are rightly highlighted as a core challenge. And the phenomenal work now by so many across the sector is going a long way to address this, with partners such as TTS playing a leading role. But the conversations around access can sometimes be used to deflect other issues. Let's take the T of STEAM for a moment and think specifically about technology. I'm going to share with you an example. It's from one mid-sized multi-academy trust who, like many others, were seeking to provide one-to-one device access to their students. They wanted to encourage greater independence, more targeted work setting, and more fluidity between home and school. Fantastic! Now, after some time, the trust had sourced through purchasing, donations, bring your own devices and fundraising, enough devices that every child had the potential to have one-to-one access. Moreover, every device was internet connected. Fabulous. But after a full term had passed, only 63% of those devices had been used. That means that nearly 40% of the equipment provided for children's learning was not being used. Now, the issue here is not the access. Neither is it an isolated example. Let's look at the research. In a study across 13 countries, two researchers, Light and Pearson, found that once a minimal standard of infrastructure was in place, the presence of the technology infrastructure and the equipment itself made insignificant difference to the frequency and to the nature of use within teaching. And by the way, according to BISA data, most schools have more than what they referred to as the minimal standard of infrastructure in place already. Furthermore, data from the International Teaching and Learning Survey, TALIS, shows us that even in schools with a comprehensive infrastructure, there can often be very low levels of meaningful technology engagement. In other words, the causes of the inequalities in teaching and learning are about much more than just access to devices or software or connectivity. Now, similar findings have been found in research that have addressed other aspects of STEAM, whether that's the subjects of science, engineering, arts, maths, or the principles around problem solving, communication, collaboration, co-construction, creativity, critical thinking, resilience, and growth mindset. Now, from an academic perspective, it might just be useful to share with you that often large-scale research around why teachers don't engage with a particular tool or strategy often use a surface-level form of data generation, quite often surveys. And they often have fairly leading questions. For example, offering multiple choice responses that focus on external variables rather than internalised barriers. But we're not here to talk about methods and methodology. The point is, If the beating heart of STEAM learning is about 21st century ways of thinking, then we need to think about this in relation to our fabulous teachers as well as our fabulous students. We need to move on from older forms of thinking, which get bogged down in developing teachers in a constructivist way, focusing disproportionately on professional development as a sequence of learning more stuff or learning how to do more stuff. Let's think about how we're approaching teacher development. In the past, teacher development has often been rooted around the acquisition of knowledge or the training about the particular use of tools or strategies. The knowledge acquisition might be quite sophisticated, including focusing on subject knowledge or pedagogical knowledge or subject pedagogical knowledge. That's great. The training on tools may also be quite sophisticated, including hands-on engineering tools, online systems or platforms, mathematical equipment or resources, musical instruments, chemicals and laboratory kit, amongst many, many more and innovative tools. But if we reflect on this kind of teacher development for a moment, most of the emphasis tends to be on raising awareness about what to use and how to use it. Now, great professional learning, of course, includes what to use and how to use it. And great professional learning provides sustained, reflective routes to strengthen both. But we might want to move on from knowledge acquisition and the use of equipment and resources as being seen as the starting point of good teaching and learning and teacher development. We know, don't we, that great teaching and learning is about more than that. So do you remember earlier, we talked about teachers being about more than just delivery vehicles for knowledge. We talked about teachers being unique human beings, influenced by the world around them. We talked about the gap between what an individual teacher has experienced so far in their own life, both personally and professionally, and what we are now asking them to teach others through STEAM. We illustrated that with a metaphor of a bridge that we need to build for each teacher to cross that gap. Great teachers of STEAM have strong bridges, and there's a reason for it. It's because they navigate teaching and learning with a backpack of knowledge, subject knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and subject pedagogical knowledge. But more than that, they are skilled navigators who know where they are going, why they are going there, and how they're going to get there. Those teachers have knowledge that's the result of something called the 3 C's. Cognizance, what we are aware of and understand. Competence, what we're skilled in doing in practice. And confidence, how much we feel capable of doing. Thinking about the 3 C's as separate but interlinked aspects of teacher development helps us to be more precise, more forensic about teacher development. It forces us to think about supporting our teachers on their professional journey, developing their relationship with everything that STEAM has to offer. Because ultimately, it's the relationship between the teacher and STEAM that will define the relationship between each learner and STEAM, isn't it? Now let's look at each of those 3's in turn. I'm going to give you some practical ways that you can unpack these yourself and with your colleagues. Let's start with cognizance, what we're aware of and what we understand. Let's recognise that teachers are not just professionals teaching STEAM, but also human beings living in a STEAMy world. We're all surrounded by and immersed in STEAM influences, which affect how we think about both the subjects and the principles within STEAM itself. Now let's use digital technology as an example. We are surrounded by digital profiles and identities, home heating, lighting, personal finance, online ordering and delivery, mapping routes, counting steps, rating products. Digital devices and processes surround us all the time. Some we love, some we find frustrating, some we're indifferent to or don't even notice. But exposure to technology in our wider lives influences our habits, our behaviours, our actions, our thoughts, and our ideas. And that translates into our classroom beliefs and our classroom practices. So here is a practical way you can embrace this. Choose an aspect of STEAM, whether it's one of the subject areas or one of the principles behind STEAM, such as problem solving. Engage staff in thinking about their lives beyond school for a moment. What are their experiences of this? And how do those experiences shape their actions? For example, if we were thinking about maths and problem solving, where and how do staff use their own math skills, particularly beyond school? For example, DIY in the shops, cooking, travelling, home budgeting. How challenging are the problems that they need to solve those mathematical problem solving skills? And what do they do if those problems become more complex? How did they go about seeking help or support? And what tools and resources did they draw upon? Now, this is where encouraging staff to reflect on these ideas using examples from beyond the school walls is particularly helpful because it roots our thinking in real world application. Encourage staff to reflect on these ideas and then think about how those experiences shape their actions, their decision making, and their collaboration with other people. What we want to achieve here is some practical discussion about how cognizant we are, how aware we are of a particular aspect of STEAM in detail. So first, how aware we are of the similarities and differences between our personal real life experiences and the experiences that we are providing for our children in our classrooms. And second, an awareness and understanding about professional knowledge. What do we know about and understand? What do we know about but don't yet understand? And which areas do we not yet know about? And those give you practical routes upon which to build staff knowledge development. So that's a simple discussion-based activity to start unpacking the first of the 3 C's, cognizance. Before we can begin to develop any kind of knowledge, we need to be clear about our cognizance in that space. Now, you can't do this for all aspects of STEAM in one go. We would all feel totally overwhelmed by the discussion itself, let alone any consequent training or development. This is about using the principles of formative assessment with your teachers for whichever STEAM priority you are going to be focusing on next. So once we know about cognizance, what individual teachers are aware of and understand, we can begin to think about how to develop competence. Now, competence is about being skilled at doing or something, using something in practice. It's not about being able to do it. It's about being skilled in doing it. And that distinction is important because you can do something without understanding it, just by copying or reenacting a process. That doesn't reflect competence. That's also why professional learning needs to begin with identifying cognizance, setting out a baseline of what the awareness and understanding are first, before building knowledge on top. Now, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know here. This is basic stuff in classroom formative assessment. We do it with our students every single day. This is about the teachers as individual human beings. So building competence is about developing knowledge that can be applied within STEAM provision. It might be subject knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, or subject pedagogical knowledge. Those are the nuts and bolts of teaching and learning STEAM accurately, diligently, clearly, and respectfully. And there are lots of sources of support, including those offered by TTS, which will help with developing teacher knowledge across STEAM. But being competent at providing teaching and learning within your STEAM provision is not enough. It ticks a box, but it misses the point, doesn't it? We want our students to be engaged and enthused, inspired and imaginative, passionate and probing with their questions and aspirations. And to achieve this, we need to build confidence within our teachers. Now, being confident comes largely by doing something and perceiving there to be a positive feedback loop. This positive feedback can be internalised, where we recognise that we've achieved our own goals or our own intentions, or it can be seen externally, praise from others, positive data, or being offered new opportunities. Now, think about this for a moment. As teachers, we tend to be quite self-critical, don't we? Always focusing on our next steps and how we can improve, or things that didn't quite go to plan and need rethinking. Now, that's absolutely vital for improving practice, reflecting in action and reflecting on action. But we need to be mindful that this can also interfere with levels of confidence and inadvertently constrain perceptions of competence. So we must make sure that we plan explicitly for building confidence at the same time as planning for any form of training or support in our STEAM provision. Some practical solutions might be via the senior leadership team providing targeted praise for staff trying out new ideas, 5-minute idea sharing at the start or end of planning meetings, or try setting teachers up in trios where they can informally share successes in small groups. Encourage teachers to share their successes beyond the school. Write an article for a teacher magazine, share at a local event, add a contribution to an online teacher resource site, add something to a LinkedIn group or a Twitter hashtag thread. The point is, plan to build confidence and don't just assume it will follow naturally. Our brilliant teachers can be incredibly self-effacing and often not recognising just how well they are doing. As a profession, we need to actively plan to build the confidence of our brilliant teachers. So, to knit all these ideas together, let's just think about the metaphor we introduced earlier, about the teacher crossing a bridge. That bridge connects the place that the teacher is coming from, their prior experiences of STEAM subjects and principles and their prior experiences of teaching and learning, connects that to the place that you are collectively going, your vision for STEAM provision. You need your teachers to cross that bridge on their journey. So imagine that teacher wearing a backpack. No, not like that one. More like this one. Imagine that teacher with a backpack filled with an increasingly strong set of subject knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and subject pedagogical knowledge. They acquire this knowledge and they carry it with them. But remember, that bridge connecting your teachers with your vision for STEAM provision consists of 3 stages: cognizance, competence, confidence. Cognizance, what the teacher is aware of and understands. Competence, what the teacher is skilled at doing. And confidence, what the teacher feels capable of doing. And importantly, remember that those 3 C's are all rooted to that individual human being. They start with the teacher, not the vision. There's no point building a bridge if no one wants to cross that river, is there? Now, by consciously planning for professional learning and development for each of those 3 C's, cognizance, competence, confidence, you will build that bridge for each teacher. You will cross that bridge and your vision for STEAM provision will become a reality, not just for your organisation, but for that individual teacher. And not just for that individual teacher, but for the young people who matter most, our young learners.